Welcome back to the Sharpest College Football Podcast, our Big 12 preview. This is BuckMetrics, joined as always by Robert Martin. Robert, it is Friday. It's Friday afternoon where you are, still Friday morning where I am. How are you?
Pretty good, yeah. I think we are recording this at a bit of an odd time. Obviously, it doesn't matter cause it's a preview, but yeah, this is unique. This is a podcast in the afternoon for me. I'm pretty excited to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we're fortunate. I guess there's all kinds of tech issues across the world, so fortunate that we're still able to record. Lucky us. And lucky us that we have same guests as we had last year for the Big 12 preview. Nathan at Big12 Mafia on Twitter. Nathan, thank you for rejoining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation, guys. I'm looking forward to doing it again, figuring out how bad I did last year and how bad I'm going to be this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, this is a tricky year, so we're definitely going to need some help from you on this because not the most straightforward conference. I guess I'll say that just as a top level.
Right.
Yeah. So, overview, revisiting our predictions last year. As Nathan said, we didn't really do awesome in our predictions last season. None of us had either participant in the title game. We all liked Kansas State. They were okay. Oklahoma disappointed last year. They had a good season,
Yeah,
but just
BYU had Oklahoma on the mat. BYU
that.
had
Yes.
Oklahoma down and Oklahoma State. So it's not
They
like I
lost
was
by two
totally off
scores.
base.
I believe they lost by two scores because they were driving for the winning touchdown and
Well,
they threw a pick six, right?
yeah, yes. That was it. I think that was, if I remember right, at the end of the first half or into the third quarter. If they would have gotten that touchdown, I think they were up 10 or two touchdowns, and I think they win. It was, boy, that just I was right. Unfortunately, I was in the end zone and I saw that guy
Oh
coming,
my gosh.
the Oklahoma guy, and I was with my father for his birthday present, and I was so mad. It took all of my self-control not to just jump onto the field and beat the hell out of some linesman or something.
And full disclosure, like all season, was Nathan feeling okay that day when he made that prediction? And
Oh well.
it was brilliant. I love it. They were
Yeah.
at least like what, two touchdown dogs, I think.
Oh yeah, they were supposed to get 17 points, something like that.
Yeah.
And again, BYU goes down and scores right there. I think they win the game. So
Oh man.
anyway, it's the way it works.
By the way, are you in Provo or where are you?
I'm just north of Provo, Pleasant Grove, about
Okay.
10 minutes away from Provo.
Cool. Nice. Beautiful area up there. I've been to Salt Lake a couple times. It's lovely
It
up there.
is.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we will do better this year. We promise, dear listeners and viewers. This is how I see the Big 12 this year. I believe this is in Ho Chi Minh City. Not sure, but I see a
It looks
giant
like Ho
track.
Chi Minh City. I have been there. It looks like
Wow.
that. Yeah. Less
I've got a
bikes though.
traffic
There should be
jam
more
that
bikes.
yeah. I think I've got two of the bikes that kind of avoided this identified, but after that, this is a tricky one for me. This is a tough one. Are you feeling the same way, Nathan? A lot to untangle here, and we still might not know?
Yeah, I think when I looked at my top or 16 teams, I see 7 or 8 that could win the whole thing. That's how
Yep.
crazy the Big 12 is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think if you asked five smart people, they would agree with you. And you'd
Right.
probably have 4 or 5 different groups of 7 or 8 among them too.
Oh, I'm positive some people are going to look at a couple of mine and be like, huh, what are you talking about? But it's
We
a
wouldn't do
crazy
that to you,
league. There's no
buddy.
doubt.
Yeah, we wouldn't do that
Okay.
to you until you're gone. And then I'm
Okay.
kidding.
Okay.
All right. Here's the glossary we put together. Just real quick, I'm referring to a lot of these metrics throughout the previews here. If you want to understand what it is, maybe just pause, do a screen capture, save this to your desktop so you can refer to it for the rest of the year. Go ahead and do that now, and we will move on. Here's the overview of all the teams. This is just in order of last year's power rankings from best to worst power rating. Big picture notes, the conference loses Texas and Oklahoma. They add 3 from the 4 corners, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and AS. One thing that stuck out to me, this is a weak defensive conference. Not a lot of good defenses in here, but a couple of really bad ones. And like we talked about, I think this is probably the most wide open conference.
Right.
And with that, let's get to the first team. And again, these are just in order of last year's power rankings. Iowa State. Now, again, we don't have Texas and Oklahoma recurring, so of the returning teams, they have the highest rated returning team in the Big 12 this season. Before last season, I don't even know if it was. This might have even happened after our preview. We were joking about, and Nathan, remind me if we even talked about this with you. We were joking about how the gambling scandal at Iowa probably did
Oh,
Iowa State a favor.
Yes.
because Hunter Decker stunk, and
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
this accelerated the movement to the next guy, and the next guy was good. A
Yes.
113 apex in his first year starting. They actually come out a winner in terms of the Ryan sweepstakes. They are, if I bring my mouse over here, they returned more Ryan than they had last season. They actually wound up adding more than they lost. And they
Wow.
were one of the best. They actually had a solid, nationally solid offense last season. They actually had the best defensive power rating and best defensive apex in the whole conference. And they have the most returning starters, and they have the highest improvement metric on defense last year, too. From a scheduling standpoint, if I look between at Iowa and this game at Arrowhead, I see a stretch of generous, forgiving, winnable games. I
Yep.
think this team can get very hot. I think things set up nicely for them. I love over 7.5 here. I think you've got literally all the pieces. You've got a defensive standout in a conference without defense and a more than capable offense. I think 10-1 as Big Ten champs is beautiful value. I love both of those. Just plays out right out of the gate without really not running any detailed numbers. Nathan, what do you think about the Cyclones?
I love the returning players. They have very veteran team. Them in Utah have really a lot of depth on their teams, and I have Iowa State at 8 out of 16, but in that 8, I have 4 or 5 that are the exact same record. So it's quite possible they could end up 8 or they could end up in the top 3. But again, you nailed all the highlights. I wouldn't disagree with anything you said. If you look at their schedule at Utah, that's gonna be tough. Kansas State, and then at West Virginia. Other than that, they could go 9-3.
Yeah. At Iowa is always tough. And I think Matt Campbell's won that maybe once, maybe. I don't want to devolve into Iowa jokes here, but yeah,
Well,
I
I
guess what
get
would
you.
be the one place where you don't see him as like in the top 2 that I like? Where do you think that I'm a little optimistic in terms of the Cyclones?
Again, I would refer back to the offense. In a league that is very offensive heavy, their offense is good. You said it nationally it was really good last year. I think this year they may struggle a little bit. But again, you have all those returning players. Who knows? They could go hot. You're right. The Iowa game is a sort of a toss-up. You could go 8-3, and then the Iowa game could be a toss-up. I still think they're going to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, and fair. I guess the one thing is I'm not an X and O's guys, but I know what my eye sees, and
Right.
my numbers like them more. If I just look at them schematically, they look like an 80s offensive scheme. They don't do a
A little
bunch of
bit.
like complicated, like awesome, oh my gosh, what is this? Lincoln Riley kind
Right.
of stuff. So I can definitely see that. All right, Robert, are you more optimistic than me, or are you more in the realistic camp with Nathan?
No, I actually really do Iowa. I love the 10-1 to win the conference. I really do. That number, season win over 7.5, very doable. You can very easily find a path to 9, 10 wins, depending. I think your 3 toughest are Iowa, Kansas, Utah. That's what I think the toughest ones are. Kansas State in there, of course, as well. But that even then, that's still 8-4, assuming you lose all those. There's definitely a path to the over 7.5 there. I This team like Matt Campbell does this, right? He's okay. We have like you have up years and down years, right? And we called this a couple years ago when he was in the running for the Notre Dame job. We're like, she should try to get out now because this is going to be a down year for them, and that was a very down year, right? But
Yeah.
last year they definitely overperformed expectations, and they were pretty good, right? So I trust him. I think he's I think like in the new look Big 12, I think he's generally one of the better coaches in the Big 12. And I think when you give him actual pieces to do things, and again, like when you're looking at the composition of the Big 12, again, Oklahoma is gone, Texas is gone. You're now looking at smaller state schools. Like okay, there's a couple of Texas schools, that's fine, but Texas is fractured. Iowa has Iowa and Iowa State. Utah has BYU and Utah. We're getting to smaller and smaller schools. You're not competing against these monolithic schools that have tons and tons of NIL money, right? More will go a longer way. And if you have a good coach who's able to get good value out of your players, that's going to go a long way in this conference. And I think that's exactly what Matt Campbell does, and I think that's exactly where he fits well into this. So he's had success here in the past. And the thing is, last year, they lost to Texas. That was a very close game. They could have won that game too. They could have almost beat Texas, the eventual champions last year. I really do like this team. I think this team could definitely do a lot this year.
You make one good point too, and I think this is a fair one to close out on. I think it's been really silly how people have criticized Matt Campbell for not winning the Big 12. Yeah. He's in the same conference as Oklahoma and Texas, okay? That's really a dumb criticism. I think let's give it 3 years, and if he hasn't won it in 3 years, let's revisit that. But, a silly criticism of a guy. It's Iowa State, people. Let's move on. All right. Next, Kansas Jayhawks. There you go. My guy, Lance Leipold. They have, by my metrics, the top returning Big 12 quarterback. 6 Apex last year. Documented that Mr. Daniels struggles to stay healthy at some times. Retained 85% of their Ryan, which is very solid. They're in elite in that category. They lose. I struggle with this guy's name, Andy Kotelnicki, to Penn State. So I'm curious how the offense is going to look without him. I think there's a little bit of brand inertia here where people remember how horrible Kansas was on offense or on defense that first year. And I said, look, this guy's a good coach. He's not just a one-hit wonder. And you can see the defensive improvement under him. Let's not forget, he didn't have a spring practice in that first season. So this is a horrible defense, but he had very little to work with. Improvement over 2 seasons by almost 11 points is enormous. 11 points is basically an absolute elite defense. So basically you're going from average to Georgia level in terms of this level of improvement. Don't know if you guys saw this. They have no on-campus home games this season.
Right.
The conference ones are at Arrowhead. I don't know where these first two are, Lindenwood and UNLV, but that's interesting. Don't know how that's going to play out. I have them favored in at least 10 games this season. So I love over 8 here. Looks like the market likes that too. Last one I checked, it was minus 125 on the over. Big 12 champs, this plus 900, there's probably some value there, but I'm so jazzed on Iowa State. I think that's going to get most of my action. Am I just too much in love with Lance Leipold on this, Robert? Or is this a realistic assessment that over 8's a really solid bet here?
No, and we have been on Lance Leipold a long time here, right? We've been a very huge fan of his. I love when he came here to take this program over from Les Miles. Again, you mentioned that 9.8, obviously a horrible season, but we all remember that one game in that season when they took down Texas, right? So that shows you, right? So that was obviously okay, we're really bad this season, but we're going to get better, right? That was okay, we're improving long term, but this season we're going to be bad. The next season, they improved a little bit, right? That's when they got to almost competitive. I think they almost made a bowl in that season. Then last season, they were really good. They were one of the best teams actually early season, but then Jalen Daniels went down with an injury, right? And it is crazy to think again, and he went down unfortunately right before Texas. He was about to start the game and he didn't start the game. That's crazy. What if he doesn't get injured and he starts that game, right? So everything could be completely different at this point, right? We could be talking about everything completely differently if he starts that game. You could have been Texas may not have been on a path to the Big 12 championship game or the playoffs. That may have fixed a lot of actual other problems too. Maybe then we wouldn't have had to worry about Florida State then. Kansas, this is your fault too. But no, this is the thing. We like this team. This team keeps getting better and better. He's a really good program builder. Again, the only question mark on this is Jalen Daniels. And I feel like plus 900 for the Big 12 championship, I feel like there's way too much of Jalen Daniels injured price in there. I feel like basically you're like plus 900 for Jalen Daniels to survive an entire season. I like that price. I like that number I'll take it at that number. If he gets injured again, okay, whatever, but I like him at that number to survive a season.
Yeah, one thing you didn't mention before I hand it over to Nathan here, Jason Bean also got injured too. They had a guy, I think his name is Ballard, who started 1 or 2 games at quarterbacks. They really went to the depths last season. Are you as optimistic as we are on this one, Nathan, or are you going to give us a dose of reality here?
I've gone back and forth with Kansas, and it's because the quarterback position. Jalen Daniels is a Heisman candidate if he plays the whole season. He's my Heisman pick out of the Big 12 if he plays the whole season. BYU played him last year, and he played well. Bean came out and was right behind him and played maybe even better at stretches. Bean's gone. I don't even know who the backup quarterback is, and it's really on Jalen Daniels' back. Now, you impressed me with the numbers on the defensive side. I didn't realize it had gone up that much, and you can win in the Big 12 if you have a very strong defense. But it all comes down, in my opinion, to the quarterback. And if I'm looking at the different games, West Virginia at West Virginia, that's extremely difficult. Kansas State at Kansas State, extremely difficult. Iowa State's at home, that's good, but you never know where that's going to go. And I would put BYU as that one for over under at 8. I'm going to say the same thing about the Kansas game as I did about Oklahoma last year. BYU at the end of the season, I think could bushwhack Kansas. So I have them at 9-3, maybe 8-4 if BYU has a good game. And we'll see. I don't know. It really depends how well a team like Utah, Kansas State, and Arizona do to see how they'll compete at the top of the table.
Very fair, yeah, and they do actually miss Utah too, which I think is fortunate.
Yeah.
But and they get Iowa State at home. I know not everybody's as high on them, but a couple of favorable schedule draws, and also not sure about what TCU is, but I'm sure that these next two teams are going to struggle a bit this season. So you've got a nice breather there in back-to-back weeks. All right, who we got next? Arizona Wildcats. This is like, how does this all fit in a couple of manners? First of all, how do they fit into the Big 12? How does the new coach fit into what Jed Fish did and remains in place? I like Brent Brennan. He was a very good coach at San Jose State. Let's not forget, I think he had them undefeated in the COVID season when they won the Mountain West. They had a sneaky good season in 2019 before that. People forget they were horrible before he got there. So it's not like they had to settle when they hired Brent Brennan. Noah Fafita was awesome as a freshman. Started 9 games. Apex of 131 is spectacular. Started against USC, his first career start, and tore us apart. And that actually turned out to be maybe not as horrible as first seen for USC, although they certainly confirmed that they're a bad defense later. They lose Jacob Cowing to graduation. They return Tetaroa, struggle with that name, McMillan, who actually had 7, and Ryan last season. What's interesting is this game at Kansas State is a non-conference game. They had signed that before, so you're going to get questions about this. People are going to be confused. They just won or lost to Kansas State. How do they not have a record? I think that's a good test of year one of Brennan. New Mexico is going to struggle early. Northern Arizona is FCS. I think at Kansas State is going to be a good acid test. Can they be competitive? Can they be better than competitive at Kansas State? Not an easy place to play. That to me is the game to watch for this team this season. Weirdly, two trips to the state of Utah. They're at Utah and at BYU, which I don't think probably too many teams are going to do this season. Excuse me. Win total of 8, shaded to the under. Big 12 champs at 10-1. I don't know what to make of that total. My inkling is at 10-1. I'd much rather take Iowa State than Arizona. I'm just waiting and seeing specifically for week 3 at Kansas State on Arizona. Nothing else until then. What about you, Nathan?
I think that's a good litmus test. Kansas State, it's interesting it's out of conference, so that gives them a little bit of a bye even if they lose that. At Utah, Texas Tech, at BYU is their toughest stretch. BYU has Arizona's number. BYU plays really well against Arizona historically, and it's in Provo. That Utah game, that Utah's out for blood this year. So if they can stay healthy, they're going to be extremely difficult to beat in Salt Lake City. Texas Tech, I think, is going to be improved. I think they're going to be better than they were last year. Colorado's a gimme. You have West Virginia at home. That's good. At UCF, that's another one. That's a road trip and a half going all the way to Florida. Houston is a throwaway. Arizona is a throwaway, especially as the the Territorial Cup in Arizona. And then at TCU, I don't know what we're going to get at TCU. I have them at 11 this year. They could be really improved, or they could be down near the bottom. So over under at 8 even is interesting. I was thinking it was going to be 8.5. So I would probably take the over on that if I was to bet the over under.
You make a good point. I forgot about this. Arizona completely pantsed Utah last year at home. Just embarrassed them. I remember because I predicted that. That was my preseason prediction.
Okay, there you go.
But now Utah gets them at home. This is going to sound like kind of a dick thing to say. Cam Rising won't be hurt yet. So that actually could get ugly. That could be like the proverbial, this is why you don't like to play at Rice Eccles game.
Yeah, I think
Exhibit A this season. Yeah. 2 members of the jury are still not to vote on this one, Robert. Do you have an inkling on Arizona?
I'm a little lower on Arizona, actually. When Jed Fish left, he did take some of the pieces with him, obviously, and some of them just left in general after when he left. And I'm kind of surprised Noah Fifita? Yeah. Fafita, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised he actually stayed. I kind of thought he'd be gone after that. Usually, when you lose a coach in the port, usually when the coach is gone, that's the quarterback is usually follows him or goes somewhere else. Brent Brennan is interesting. Yes, you do mention that they had a good 2019 season, and then they did win the Mountain West in 2020, I believe. 2020 is also when they beat USC, and I think that was the end of Clay Helton, right? I believe in
Yeah,
US.
maybe.
2020 was when
Or
Helton was fired.
2021. Oh, I think there was a loss to San Jose State in there. I remember that. And that was with a Brent Brennan San Jose State team, I believe.
I don't think they lost to San Jose State, but they had your typical, wow, this is not really a satisfying win. That was like the Clay Helton
Oh,
special.
okay.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
jump up a 3 touchdown lead and win by 3. And nobody's happy at the end. All teams are dissatisfied.
Fair. Okay. Yeah, they did have a good year in that COVID year, but then the thing was, people were like, "Oh, they're a good team now. We're expecting them to do good things." But in 2021 and 2022 and 2023, not the greatest team. They've not had the greatest years. They've never really gotten back into that conference title picture, right? So, you almost wonder if okay, yeah, he had a good year. Maybe he had a lot of good returning players. COVID year, weird stuff happened. I'm almost wondering if that was maybe a bit fluky because they have not had the greatest year since then. So I'm skeptical. I'm not completely out on Arizona yet, but I'm a little skeptical just because of those past results there at San Jose State. It also took them a while to build up to that, right? I worry that the best pieces are gone. I worry, again, we see really strong ratings there. I wonder how much of that was Jed Fish and how much of that is just the program itself. And I wonder how much of that will go away with Jed Fish versus Brent Brennan. And maybe it might take him a little bit longer to build up this program than expected. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of Arizona. They're not one of my teams that can win this. Of the 3 so far, 2, obviously, I think Iowa State and Kansas can win it. I don't think Arizona's there. I think they're back more in the pack. That's why I view the over under 8, and I wouldn't hate a shot on the under there. But we'll see. That's just my thoughts on it. But I'm a little lower on Arizona.
I guess none of us at least see them pulling out of the traffic jam. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right. Who we got next? Yeah, this is, who knows? UCF. They pick up KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, whose SEC career was murdered. Again, sorry, as I predicted by Dan Enos, I did not like that hire for Arkansas, and both him and his quarterback are now departed from Arkansas. I don't think he even made it through the season. New DC, Ted Roof. I don't get this. I don't really know anybody whose defense was coached by Ted Roof over the last 15 years who probably thinks this is a good hire. That week 6 game at Florida is interesting. I think you're not going to be really challenged until then. I don't think much of TCU, and we'll get to Colorado and they get them at home. I don't know. I guess I'm looking to that game at Florida. If they play Florida close, then maybe I'll believe in this team a little more. But they're just a blank slate to me. 7.5. I've got so many coin flips right here with the new quarterback, new DC. Don't know how KJ fits in under Gus, although Gus's best work has typically been with quarterbacks that other coaches developed. I'm not interested in the Big 12 champs at 9-1. So wait and see at least until they play Florida. Nathan, any thoughts on UCF? Are you as stymied as I am?
You look at their schedule; it's not overly difficult. That home game with Utah, and then they have one with Arizona. Those are probably going to be their toughest games at home. On the road, Iowa State, that's going to be difficult. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Florida game probably is the litmus test. Florida down. Look, Napier's going to get fired this year unless they win 10 games or something. He's going to be gone. It might not be as tough as a test as it looks right now on paper. What's the over/under? 7.5. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty opaque to me. I wouldn't know what to take above or below that.
All right, I'm writing this down. Robert, Jamie Chadwell is Florida's next coach, according to Nathan, as we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, we did
I
talk
don't
about
know
that
who it
yesterday.
is.
Yeah, that would be a prime candidate, to be fair. Jamie Chadwell, I think, would be like the number, which should be the number one targeted for the next SEC vacancy. That'd be my guess. But no, I don't know if he's going to get fired or not. The thing is, by this time we'll know, though, right? If
That's true.
that's the thing, right? If that's Florida's 5th win, because that's basically their streak, right? UCF is their last quote unquote bad team that they play, right?
Right.
Their first 6 games are against, our first 5 games are against quote unquote lower quality teams, and then their last 7 are against really good teams, right? So if they're not if Florida's not undefeated going into this game, yeah, it's done. And then to be fair, this could be the nail in the coffin game. This
That
100%
yeah.
could be, right? That's the thing. So that is one point right there. I am really iffy on this UCF team. This UCF team was very clearly not ready for the Big 12. They were not ready. I just still don't know if they are yet or not. KJ Jefferson is, I guess, an upgrade. Maybe he is an upgrade over their current quarterback, or their former quarterback, I should say, John Reese Plumlee. But that's not. I'm not like, oh man, problem solved. There were other problems here too. Now they have some good stats though. They returned quite a bit of Ryan, and their defense is showing up pretty good. But again, they were just really far back though. Could they be one of the better teams in the Big 12? Yeah. And is it really fun to have to travel to UCF to play? No. But I'm still not convinced that they can compete with your Kansas and your Iowa States. I don't think they're up there. I view them as that Arizona tier, like good but not elite.
Yeah, fair point. I guess you make a good point too about, I think from a skill standpoint, KJ Jefferson's probably among the best. I'm just wondering how much confidence he has. He had an apex. His apex was 76 last season. That's got to hurt your confidence. Now, like I said, Gus's best work is with QBs that have been developed by other people. Maybe he can work his magic here. Gus likes mobile quarterbacks, so there's a path there. That's such a wild card to me that this is just we're all seem to be just very much wait and see on this team. Speaking of
Yeah.
wait and see teams, I've got no idea what we're getting here.
Yeah.
Let's
agree.
just start with this. They actually, from a metrics power rating standpoint, last year's team was better than the one that actually made the national title game somehow. That's just how fluky that 2022 season was. Completely starting over on the offensive line, only 14 returning starts. One of the lowest improvement metrics you're going to see. Interesting is you've got, I'm going to call a mediocre defense. It's about average for this conference, but they get Andy Avalos, not a great coach. I think he's a superior defensive coordinator. I think longer term that works well. This is what's interesting to me, and not to spoil the ACC preview. You're going to have a okay defense that's just average in terms of the amount of returning talent and improvement. Week 1, they're at Stanford, and I'm not going to tell you Palo Alto is a bear of a place to play. That's like a home away from home for USC, or it has been. Rest in peace, Pac-12. This is year 2 of Troy Taylor at Stanford. Stanford returns like everybody and everything. I'm interested to see / will not be surprised if Stanford's offense is a step ahead of the TCU defense all day, as they're just going to know their dance steps a lot better. That's all I have for this team. Other than that, I see them squarely in the middle of, I guess, Ho Chi Minh Avenue and 5th, right in the middle of that. I have no opinion on the season win totals. This is the nerd in me. I cannot wait to watch them play at Stanford, and it's probably going to be stuck behind a paywall, so I might not be able to watch it. It's going to be on that weird ACC channel that nobody gets. Stanford's in the ACC now.
Oh, so that's right.
I don't have a lot to offer other than week 1. Please let me watch this one. Other than that, not much to offer. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I'm completely on board with TCU. That 8.5, actually, that's looking very tempting. That's a very tempting 8.5. I'm looking at that number. I might go bet that after we're done here. But this is the thing. TCU is one of these weird. It's such a weird team, right? They were so good or quote unquote good in their year when they won the. Actually, they lost the Big 12, but they went to the finals of the college football playoff. They looked so good that year, but then they lost all their pieces. Right? You lose Max Duggan, you lose a really good receiver, lose a really good running back, lose a bunch of other pieces. They're all gone, and then you come out this year and you're massive favorite against Colorado, and you straight up lose against Colorado. And that was the first sign that, okay, this is not going to go according to plan. And it did not go according to plan. They didn't even make a bowl game. And although, and again, they also we don't talk about it here particularly, but they did lose their offensive coordinator to Clemson last year. The other Riley.
Garrett Riley.
Garrett Riley, there you go. It's not I'm not like, oh man, I have huge faith in this team. I really don't. I'm considering that Stanford line. That Stanford line looks very tasty, honestly. But The thing is, I need to see this team. I need to see if this team is actually good or if this is back to old TCU. TCU has gone from really good, really bad, to really good, to really bad, right? This is they just wobble all over the place depending on the year, depending on the coach, right? And Sonny Dykes is probably fine for now, even if he has a rough year this year, but then after that, maybe not, right? This is the year like, hey, okay, maybe was it just a fluke? You had a really good recruiting class, or was it the fact that you're actually a good coach? Because we need to see a step up here for me to actually think he's one of the top coaches in the Big 12, despite the fact that he made it to the national championship game.
Yeah, fair. Another one that seems stuck in the traffic jam. Are you putting them on either side of the traffic jam, Nathan, or you have them squarely in the middle of it?
It's another one, just anywhere from 8 to 14. Yeah, I don't know. The 7.5, I would not bet the over on that. I think they're a 7-5 team. I'm looking at their schedule at Utah, got Oklahoma
Yeah.
State and Arizona at home, but there's a stretch there, SMU, Kansas,
Yeah.
UCF. Who knows which team shows up, right?
That could be four of five could be tricky there from UCF through at Utah. That could really just sink
Yes.
them in,
Yeah.
especially if they lose at Stanford. It could quickly become a long season
Right.
with that stretch ahead of them. Yeah, back to Main Street and Ho Chi Minh Avenue there.
Gotta
All right,
love
who
the
do we
Big
got
12.
next? Yeah, that man. All right, West Virginia. I had really given up on Neil Brown. Then he finally found his quarterback. Only 31-29 at West Virginia, but he was very good at Troy. Although I'm wondering a little bit, that might be a matter of just Troy being a little bit ahead of the rest of the Sun Belt in terms of resources. Most of the Sun Belt and just having a built-in advantage. So to be seen. What's interesting too is this wasn't just Garrett Green. If you look at basically last year, their Ryan, which we talked about, and the GGAB, which is basically how much better than a replacement level running game they had. You add those two, you get a total. They were actually 17th in all of FBS. So they had not just good quarterback play, but a really well balanced offense last season. The quarterback in his first year starting full time, 122 apex, which is impressive. I like what they return in terms of the offensive line for a good running game. I guess I'll say it nicely. Not a great defense, but that doesn't seem to be a deal killer in the new Big 12, as that basically puts them just a little bit below average, but it's not, I don't see it as lethal. I don't really like this start to conference play here. This is about as tough as it can get in this conference, more or less.
Yep.
Hosting, they do get Kansas and Iowa State at home, but these are not three of your easier games. I think they're probably above average, but this start right here and plus Penn State and Pitt, this could be the classic much better than their record team. In no hurry to take any kind of action on the season wins or the Big 12 champs. This could be the classic like late season run team. Boy, you don't want to catch them now. That's the extent to which I have an opinion on how they might unfold, but that's about it. You have any more insight than me on this one, Nathan?
That stretch at the beginning's tough, isn't it? Albany is obviously the only giveaway there. Pitt is improved, I believe. Kansas, we've just gotten done talking about them. Penn State, that really is going to be the marker for the Big 12. If West Virginia goes out and actually holds Penn State down, I think that leads to good things for the conference for the rest of the years. I have them, let me bring up my form. I have West Virginia at 5 at 9-3, 8-4. So
Wow.
I would take the over on them. I think they're much better than people think they're going to be.
Interesting. And if they just eke out one or two wins in that early stretch, they do have a pretty
Right.
forgiving
Yeah, the
landing
back
strip
end of
there.
their schedule. Yeah.
Yeah. You've almost
Yeah.
got just like
So
almost five, almost by default there. So, yeah. All right, Robert, what do you think?
I know everybody's West Virginia finally good now. They're finally going to be good this year. But that season win total over under 6.5, that seems like a really kind of low number for a team. People are like, oh, they finally found their footing. I think there's a lot of kind of skepticism built into that line of, yeah, you know what, maybe they haven't fully figured this out. Again, that's a pretty tough schedule. Obviously, you got Penn State. That's not great. Pitt, okay, that's cool. But then you've got Kansas, you've got Iowa State, you've got Kansas State, you've got Arizona, and then you also have Texas Tech there at the end. UCF could be a little bit of a sneaker there. Put this as more to the back of that car jam with, I guess, with TCU. I don't know. I still, yes, this team did good last year, but they were able to take advantage of a couple of they were able to basically pull off a couple of wins in games that Although at first it looked like the teams themselves looked bad, but like on paper initially, but when they actually played those games, those teams were in bad spots. They were underperforming what they should have been doing, right? So I think generally I was not sold. I am not completely sold on their performance. I think there is still the job is not done. I don't think this is West Virginia is fine. We're good. We're done.
I think that's a good way to characterize it. Yeah, jury's still out long term on Neil Brown. There, he was like basically the most imminently fired guy going into last season.
Yeah,
So,
he really
he,
was.
yeah,
Yeah, it's true. And I thought that he probably would get run last year, and then they played better.
yeah.
So, it all depends which team shows up, as you guys have said several times. But going to West Virginia is not an easy trip. And they're getting some schools coming over from the west side of the country that I think they might be able to steal one or two. We'll have to see. 6.5 is probably right on. I'm a little higher on them than most.
Let me ask you about that because you've mentioned that 4 times. Did BYU play it at West Virginia last season? I genuinely do
Ye-
not know.
yes, and they got
Yes, they did.
absolutely beat down. It was
Okay,
one of the worst games I've ever seen BYU play. Yeah, it was really bad.
okay.
Actually, so I've got our handy Phil still here. So let me just quickly run through their wins last year for West Virginia here. So they beat Duchesne. That's cool. Then they were underdogs at home against Pitt. They were able to beat Pitt 17-16 again. A Pitt that was really much underperforming. Texas Tech, they were 6-point dogs. They won that. I think that was Tyler Shuck was gone by then. TCU, they were underdogs by 14 points. They beat them because TCU was not having a good year. Lost to Houston. Lost Oklahoma State. They beat UCF pretty handily, but UCF wasn't the greatest last year. They destroyed BYU at home. Then they lost to Oklahoma. They got blown up by Oklahoma, which was not a particularly great team. And then they beat Cincinnati, another not great team, and then they beat a Baylor team that wasn't having a good year either. And that totals up to a 9-4. And I don't know what they did in the bowl. I don't think it says the bowl game here. Oh
Look
no,
up the game.
yeah, there we go. They lost 5 bowls. Mayo Bowl, I think they were -6 against North Carolina, and I think they won. Maybe
Yeah, Drake May
I'm
didn't
not.
play in that one, so they should have.
That's right. Yes, they
Yeah,
did win that game. So look, that's a murder's row of like teams down a starting quarterback or just generally massively underperforming. Like the only good team they played was Oklahoma. They got blown out by that. Oh, and Penn State too, right? They lost 15-38 against Penn State. A shout out to the Penn State coach Franklin there covering the spread. He was a machine at covering the spread, always covering those spreads late. But then they got blown out by Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and so it was not like yes they went 9-4, surpassed expectations, and then again in the bowl game even they win the bowl game because the star quarterback was drafted at, like third in the NFL entry draft. They got really lucky in some of those games last year. I'm not convinced that we've seen West Virginia they got it figured out. I'm not convinced of that.
Let me ask you this then, Nathan. I'm curious since you've got some scars on this one. Do you think that West Virginia, I'm going to ask the complete comprehensive sentence here to give it proper context. Do you think West Virginia can beat the James Franklin led Drew Aller quarterbacked Penn State team at home? Do you think that that West Virginia has a chance in that one, given what you've seen from them in Morgantown?
It's first game of the year. The only question I would have, if it's a day game, I give the edge to Penn State. If it's a night game, I would bet West Virginia and take the points. Do you know what the
Interesting.
point spread is on that game?
I have
Since the
no
first of the
idea.
year. So it would depend. If they're 10 or less and it's a night game, I would take the points. Penn State's obviously, if they're not second or they're third in the Big Ten. So they're a fantastic team. They're going to be really good this year. That's a tough measuring stick, but they do have them at home. And I think if they play them at night, it could get ugly. So
Yeah,
we'll have to
and
see.
that's a good point. I would wonder if things don't go awesome to begin with. I don't know if Drew Aller is necessarily the guy I want to have to rely on to pull out a win, too.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
that's a week one game, and that won't be behind a paywall. That'll be a good one. So,
No, that's a Fox. That's going to be a Fox game, I think. I think it's a Fox noon,
does
if I
Fox
remember
have the
right.
Big 12?
Penn State.
No,
They
it's
have Penn
at West
State.
Virginia.
Oh, it's at West. Yeah, Fox has the Big 12. Yeah, Fox and
Oh,
ESPN
that's right.
are.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
have that one slot. Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't look at the schedule to see if it is a
Yeah.
big noon, but I thought if it's a night game, West Virginia has the advantage. If it's during the day, Penn State's going to put up some points. I think
I want that to be a night game. That'll be an awesome.
that would be. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic atmosphere for
Please.
sure.
Yeah. Hopefully
Yeah,
Fox doesn't screw that up.
yeah.
All right. Kansas State. The only thing I really have on here that really matters is I think Will Howard had a sneaky, not really good season in
Right.
2023. Avery Johnson is an upgrade. This is almost a rinse and repeat preview that they rebuild so much every year that aside from there should be some big improvement on the defense, you just never know. There's so many new faces, and you think it's almost an actuarial study where out of 5 years, Kleiman will have 3 pretty good seasons, 1 down year, and 1 exceptional season, and you can't forecast it, except for a couple years ago when they actually won the Big 12. That was a little easier to see. They won in 2022, right? I believe the Big
Yes, they
12.
did. Yeah,
Yeah,
they beat TCU. Yeah.
that roster had a ton coming back, which is not typical. This is more typical where you just have whatever returning in terms of returning experience, not really dynamic offense last season, an okay defense. This is just more like belief in Chris Clemens in his system and that Avery Johnson isn't going to take a step back as much as anything else. Are they are they near the top of the Big 12? I think probably. This minus 145 over 9.5 seems really aggressive. Plus 380 to win the Big 12 is too thin for my appetite. I'm just wait and see on here. They could be anything from average to, I guess, winning the conference, although I'm not as optimistic as the market is. What do you think about this one, Nathan?
I have Kansas State or OSU and Utah all fighting for the 2 spots in the playoffs. So yeah, I'm high on them. I think Avery Johnson is a stud, and yeah, it was a good thing. Will Howard leaving definitely didn't lose anything at that school. They have a tougher schedule though. They play Oklahoma State, they're at BYU, they have Arizona at home, that's good. But again, they're at West Virginia. They have Kansas at home, that's a good one, and then they finish at Iowa State. So they 9.5 again. That's not a. I wouldn't bet that because they could be just as easy under as they are over. But I think they're easily the second or third best team in the conference.
Yeah, what do you think, Robert?
Yeah, they are probably one of the better teams in the Big 12. I just this team finds ways to throw away a lot of games. And I'm just not the biggest fan of that, especially losses last year to Texas. They should not have lost that game. I'm just I guess Avery Johnson is on paper an upgrade over Will Howard. Will Howard was a little underwhelming at times. I don't know. They're probably the top of the pack, but it's really hard for me to differentiate between those kind of the teams I'm talking about, right? Like Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State. It's you really need to see the on-field product of this before it
Yep.
goes, right? Avery Johnson, pretty good, but not a lot of quality starts, right? So we need more data from that, right? It's more that we need more than just a bowl game of them doing well. Also, I will say one little fun fact here is that the way my model works, it will categorize the game versus Arizona as a conference game, which it is basically, but it's not a conference game, but my model will treat it as. So that's fun fact. There you go.
I like it.
I guess, who would you guys have favored in Farmageddon, the last game of the season at Iowa State? Would you guys have Kansas State or Iowa State favored in that one right now?
I think Iowa State at home. I'd probably
Yeah.
give them the advantage just because they're that 3 points that you get for playing at home. I think it's going to be a tight game though.
Okay, fair. All right.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd never feel smart betting against Chris Kleiman. I think this is one just to sit out on.
Very fair.
This one, I'm going to be way out on a limb. I'm just so far away from the conventional wisdom on this one that I'm ready to get punched as soon as I'm done with my soliloquy here.
Okay.
Their quarterback situation for Utah was horrible last season. Horrible. Cam Rising did not play. They had basically a series of guys who stunk, except when they were pulling out a late season or late game win against USC. But that got Alex Grinch fired, so all is forgiven there. I think there's a lot of faith in, hey, Cam Rising is coming back. Everything's going to be awesome. 2 things on that. Number one, he's a good quarterback, but these are not like, oh my God, I can't believe how awesome this guy is level of apex. good. I don't know this. I think you need to be a step up in this conference from an offensive standpoint. Now, I know Iowa's offensive identity is to run the ball, but I don't. Dare I say that the quarterback position is where I'm going to get punched. Might be a limiting factor for this team. It could be. It might be. I don't know. They do pick up Dorian Singer from USC. 2 years ago, I had him as the 10th best receiver in college football. He just didn't fit in with the USC offense. In fairness, they have a very experienced offensive line. That's a great sign. The defense is experienced too. I don't see them as good as everybody else did. And so I just broke it out. The traditional defensive stats, everybody was saying how great their defense was. They were 18th nationally in scoring defense and 13th in total defense just by the raw numbers. I just didn't have them as good. I only had them as a 3.3 power rating. I had them only 35th in FBS. So I just didn't see a typical Utah team last season that most people did see. I'm not saying my numbers are right. I'm just saying that my context is different from everybody else's. So I don't see a great team that was just thirsting for a quarterback. I still have questions about how good their defense was last season. Another weird thing, their week 2 game against Baylor is non-conference. I've got my eye on this game right here at Oklahoma State. This is a great matchup of, it's going to be a good test of a Utah defense that people believe in. I think they'll be good, particularly by Big 12 standards. I just don't think they'll be as elite as people think. I think them going against that Oklahoma State running game and running back is going to be a great test about where their defense is this season. One other thing, since Andy Ludwig has been at Utah, this is a crazy stat. And since it's in your neck of the woods, Nathan, you might know this. Since Andy Ludwig has been offensive coordinator at Utah, they have never had a quarterback stay healthy for the full season. It's just, you don't even look surprised.
No.
There's a lot of question marks for me here. So the season wins, whatever. I can just get past that. I look at that plus 320 as Big 12 champs. I see that almost as dead money in the pool. I'm very happy to go against that and just consider that to be going straight into the bets that do cash, and it's not going to be them. I'm way out on a limb here. I just realized I'm trying to sell a BYU guy on a case against Utah. I probably got a very favorable jury member here. Did I convince you, Nathan?
Look, Utah is good, but let's put Utah's Pac-12 history in some historical context. You could argue that this last 12, 13 years in the Pac-12 was maybe one of the worst decades the conference has ever had. Last year was an aberration. They were loaded with talent at quarterback all up and down the league, but Utah dominated the league that frankly was down. And you know how we know that? Because they never won the playoff. They never got to the playoff. The last playoff team that they had outside of Washington last year was Oregon in 2016. So the league itself, overrated is the best word I can put for it. Look at what USC became recently, right?
Yep.
So Utah's very good though. So I just want to temper that a little bit. Utah's defense is fantastic. The Big 12, I think, is going to be a little surprised by how good they are. Their offensive and defensive lines are massively strong. They're very big, and they know how to move bodies. They have excellent skill position players, but I think quarterback is the weak link. And how often could we say that in today's college football? That's BYU's problem is having a quarterback, one that's healthy and that can make it through the season and that has the talent to win. Cam is a good quarterback. He's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. He never was going to win the Heisman Trophy. He's not that type of a quarterback. And I would bet, what's the betting line? You didn't put it on your board here. What's the betting line? He doesn't make it to the end of the season. I would guess he goes about 8 games.
Yeah.
Which is interesting
that
because
seems
BYU
fair.
is like the 8th game. BYU is the 8th or the 9th game. So if he makes it to the BYU game, then Utah's been really good, and they're going to win a lot of games. If he gets hurt, say at Oklahoma State or that home game against Arizona, Utah's going to struggle just like they did last year. I told Wild Ute last year when we were talking about the preseason, I was like, Utah, he was high on Utah, of course, being a Utah grad. And I said, if he does not play, your team is an 8-5, or sorry, I think I said 8-4, 7-5 team, I even said. And they basically were exactly that without Cam. So if he plays, yeah, they're going to win some games. I do have them at the top again. I've said this before. Utah, KSU, and Oklahoma State I have as the three best teams in the league. If you look at their schedule, it is probably the easiest in the conference. If it's not
Yeah.
the easiest, it's got to be in one top two or three. They get Iowa State at home. They have Colorado, Houston, TCU, Arizona State's down. You could argue there's only really 3 or 4 teams that should even threaten them.
Yep.
So I think they're going to backdoor into the championship game. That's my opinion. But I would tend to agree with all of your analysis, except for it's not just a rising defense. It's not just an experienced offensive line. They are very good.
You make a good point, and I want to agree and disagree at the same time. I disagree at the end game, although here's what I want to. You paint a picture that I just realized right now, and I thank you for that. This almost seems like they could be to the Big 12 of what the Harbaugh and Pete Shaw Stanford teams were in the Pac-12, where it's like the rest of the conference. What on earth is this?
Yes.
How do I even? What do I do with this? Have you ever seen the Taco Fall video? Do you know what I'm talking about? When he was, do you know who Taco Fall is?
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was like 7'2" in high school, and there's a video of him playing in high school, and some 300-pound kid is trying to guard him in high school, and the guy's just, what do I do? And I think you're going to have a lot of that in terms of the rest of the Big 12. What do I do with these 350-pound poly linemen? They're knocking my teeth out on every play. That's going to be so. I didn't think about that. That's going to be awesome to see. I'm much more excited about this.
Kyle Whittingham, arguably the best coach in the conference.
Yeah,
he's going to retire in the next year or two. But Kyle is on record. He said last year was his best team, and then Cam didn't play, and it wasn't their best season. He's on record saying this is the best team he's had, bar none. He's been there 21 or 22 years. If this team, and I'm going to say this to all Utah fans that are watching, if your team this year does not win the Big 12 and at least win one playoff game, I don't know when Utah is ever going to win a playoff game because this team is loaded, absolutely loaded to go all the way to the Final Four.
One more thing before I throw it to Utah. I cannot wait to see this defense against Spencer Petras and Utah State. That's going to be fantastic.
State, man, they're just having all kinds of trouble, aren't they?
They are. All right, Robert, what do you have to add about Utah here?
No, I do agree with most of the points, right? This is one of the top 4 teams in the conference with Kansas State, Iowa State. Utah has to be up there. They have deserved, there's a lot of respect on that name, and it deserves that respect. They were one of the best teams in the Pac-12 over the last couple of years. They should be one of the best teams in the Big 12 as well. The issue with Cam Rising is this, right? Obviously, huge injury concern. That's a big problem. The other issue is the fact that, and again, a lot of people are like, oh, Cam Rising, so good. The problem is a lot of the reason why people think Cam Rising is so good was because I believe it was the performance in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, I believe, right?
Yes.
That was the Rose Bowl when it was C.J. Stroud still being quarterback, and he was basically that Olave and another wide receiver were gone, and I think a lot of their other pieces declared for the draft. He was torching a depleted Ohio secondary and looked really good. And then I think they made the Rose Bowl the next year. Again, that's when he got injured against Penn State, and he also looked good at the beginning of that game as well. And that's why people are like, oh, there's this hype around Cam Rising. And to be fair, he has been a good player. But generally, and you made this point too, the bottom part of the Pac-12 has generally been pretty bottom. In that case, that like those teams, you can stack up the yards against those teams, and there's a lot of stat padding. At least not last year, for some reason the Pac-12 was really good, but there's a lot of years when you're like, oh cool, we're playing Stanford this week. Oh cool, we're playing Washington State. There's like, you get to stat pad a lot there, right? And I feel like there is a lot of, oh, Cam Rising is amazing because he did all these things, he had all these numbers. It's like, well, okay, those numbers don't necessarily translate. Now, again, Big 12. Far from the defensive conference here. We're far away from that. But at the same time, there is some of this, okay, is Cam Rising as good as hyped? And I do question that a little bit. And I think people are like, oh, if he's just Cam Rising, there's teams amazing. This team has good pieces, 100%. I'm not saying this team is Cam Rising alone. And Cam Rising, obviously, as the team. But I don't think this team is completely made or broken by Cam Rising. And the thing is, again, at that point, then, they didn't have him for massive stretches of last year, and they clearly suffered the price for that. I think they're one of the top 4 teams, but we really need to see how this team looks in a non-Pac-12 conference and see how they stack up. And we'll get a couple of tests, right? Arizona, Oklahoma State is going to be up there. That's probably going to be their first test. Then you've got Arizona. Even Arizona State, not too bad, right? Now you get Iowa State there near the end. You avoid Kansas and Kansas State, so that's good. And that might alone get you a path to the conference championship game. Just that alone. Because I really only like Arizona, Iowa State are the only two I really see on the, obviously BYU of course, but those are the two toughest ones you have on your schedule. So there's a path for Utah, but I just at over 9.5 minus 135 and Big 12 champs plus 320, especially when Cam Rising is a massive injury risk. He was there, he was 2 weeks away from starting for the entirety of last year. It just didn't happen. So that's a huge red flag. When you get that kind of medicals, that's a huge red flag. So I like Utah being one of the top teams, but I am not ready to back them. I think there's far more value on Iowa State or Kansas, in my opinion.
Agree. I've got a little preview here of that game at Houston. Here we go. This is the video I was talking about. What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do with this? That's exactly, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do.
It's funny.
I think we're looking at that with more than a few times here. It's going to be fun to see the reverse culture shock, I guess, is how we'll characterize this team this year.
They just had a really easy schedule. I got to believe that Yormark's in the background saying, we want to win a playoff game this year. To do that, let's give Utah the easiest schedule under the sun. And they did.
We get conspiracy Ryan, conspiracy That's Nathan right. Here. There That's we go.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. A few more. Oklahoma State. I had them way down in the conference last season. I think the best analog would be I see them as last season's version of 2022 TCU. I don't believe in Alan Bowman. I believe in their running game. I think their defense stunk, and there could be improvement with, let me bring the mouse over here, with a lot of improvement metrics in second year of the defensive coordinator. I think they have such a way to go from last year. I'm not buying this team. I like the running game, but I think the pieces could fall into place there, but I don't really like them that much. I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm very bullish on Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino at Arkansas. Now, how Arkansas went up playing at Oklahoma State, I don't know how that happened. Probably when they had that horrible athletic director there. I don't know where they wind up. I'm just a little more bearish than most. I think they wind up at the front end of the traffic jam, but I don't see them in the top three or so. Nathan, it sounds like you're more bullish on them than I am. I guess my first question for you would be, are you not as concerned about Alan Bowman as I am?
I just Ollie Gordon, and I think he's going to have another good season. Again, he could challenge for that Heisman run if he plays well. Their schedule's fairly decent too. They have Utah at home, which is huge. They have West Virginia at home. That's huge. Kansas State's away, so maybe that one's a toss-up. But TCU, Texas Tech, we haven't even talked about, probably because they've fallen off the face of the earth for some reason. So I think, again, I look at their schedule and I could see 8-4, 9-3, and I don't see this league having somebody go undefeated. I don't think this league has one team that goes through and doesn't lose to somebody. So
very fair. Yeah, that's a good point. I think, I'll hold on to that. That's a great point. Okay, Robert, what about you on the Cowboys here?
Yeah, I don't believe in Alan Bowman either. I'm going to keep this one short because we've been here for a while already for some of these. Some of these are a little less interesting than some of the first ones. But I think with the over 8 minus 120 and Big 12 champs plus 750, I really find it hard to argue that this team has a better chance of winning the Big 12 than Kansas or Iowa State. That's a really big stretch for me. I think in that price, there's a lot of Mike Gundy in that price. Give me not that.
Not that.
Not that. I like it. Not that.
All right. Here we go. I'm going to be quick and not sweet on Colorado. For all of the hype that Shedeur Sanders gets, he's a pretty good quarterback, and he's not much more than that. 112 in your first season starting is it's a good apex, but it's not number one overall draft pick good. 0 GGAB. Guess what that means? They were the worst running team in all of FBS last season. And guess what? They're starting over on the offensive line again.
Yes.
Again, one thing that I learned a little bit from USC last season, and we all learned from Colorado, I guess some people didn't, is you cannot have more than 2 transfers starting on your offensive line or else it's going to fall apart. And I guess that lesson escape Dion here because it ain't going to work. That just doesn't work. I don't like Sean Lewis leaving. It was stupid to let him go. Their offense completely fell up. He didn't let him go. It was stupid to demote him mid-season, and after they demoted him, the offense completely fell apart. Not that it was – he was making decent offense out of scraps, and it just fell apart after that. They have a new DC, which fine, whatever. You needed that. I think this one gets hairy quickly, and I think Colorado might not get to double digits in that one. Nebraska's got a really serious defense, and that was in year one under a new coach. Season win total of 5.5, shaded to the over. There's probably a lot of fandom in that number. I guess if there's a play there, it's to the under. God bless you if you want to bet this team is Big 12 champs. I just think there's still a lot of hype and not a lot of reality in basically what people are expecting of this team. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, I if they win 5 games, I think that's a good season for them. This is the tough schedule, and that trip to UCF, they probably will win that because obviously Dion and they're from that part of the country. But at Nebraska, in my opinion, is a loss. Kansas State's a loss. Arizona's a loss. Texas a pick 'em. Utah's a loss. Kansas is a loss, and Oklahoma State's a loss. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see 6 wins there, but I could be wrong.
Robert?
No faith in North Dakota State there, eh?
I don't know much about them, so I know Dion
Apparently,
didn't want
they're
to
only
play
eight
him,
and a half.
right?
Yeah, they're only eight
I
and
know
a half point favorites, so that
Crazy.
that is a shocking. When you're only 8.5 point favorites against an FCS team, that's like a giant red flag there. I've actually, to full disclosure, I've already bet North Dakota State, so I'm already low on this team. This team seems to have a ton of weird personnel problems here with basically I think it was the Shedeur Sanders or someone saying like, oh, if you left the team you weren't that good anyway. That's great leadership right there. 10 out of 10. No, I agree with the critiques here, right? Shedeur Sanders is just a pretty good quarterback, right? Who was severely limited by their offensive line. And guess what? The offensive line is still a problem, right? If you were serious about this, you would have started recruiting kids and you would have basically started building an offensive line around him. You did not do that. You lost most of your offensive linemen. Secondly, you basically got rid of the offensive coordinator. Now, early in the season, you had tremendous success with the offensive coordinator when you were able to beat TCU, the defending national championship finalist, if that's a title you could have, but whatever. You did good against them and you did good in other games, and then you're like, no, you're gone. And then I believe it was the back 4 games when Sean Lewis was gone, right? It wasn't like 2 games, it was like 3 or 4, I think. They did horrible. They lost all 4 of those games, and their offense was horrible in those games. Now, Shedeur Sanders was running for his life the entire time. He put up some numbers, but was nowhere near as effective as he had been earlier in the season. It just went downhill really fast. And again, the schedule is, I think, tougher. This team seems really entitled, saying everybody when they play us is their Super Bowl. That's not true. This is a joke. This is becoming a meme at this point. They think they're amazing, and their only really positive attribute is Shedeur Sanders. This, in many ways, resembles a cult, so I'm going to fade this, yeah.
Yeah, I guess now that I look at and I have thank you both for just some smart discussion here. The picture's a little more in focus here. I don't see them winning any of these 3 games. That just isn't going to happen. I don't like them against a Chris Kleiman team is one that would actually drive him nuts. Even like a bad Chris Kleiman team. Don't like him against Nebraska. I think that the path is narrow to get over. And at minus 140, if I can fade that, I'm probably getting plus 120. I'm probably going to look into the under on there.
I don't even like them against Colorado State. They almost lost to them last season.
Yeah,
this is a revenge spot.
That was an overtime. The one thing I would say is possibly the path is this is not a great defensive conference, and maybe their offensive line issues are not as magnified in this conference as if they're playing in the Big 10. I would say they're not going to win a conference game. They can probably sneak a few in here with their offensive line problems. All right, Nathan, the last one. Yeah. I promise you, it's not personal. It's not personal. I'm just going to paint a picture here and then just throw it to you in the form of a question. Here's the good news. Keaton Slovis was not good last season. I think we've got an upgrade here. You have to go back in the resume here, but Jerry, as it's pronounced, Bohannon, had a 109 apex in his first year starting for Baylor. I think that's an upgrade. The running game stunk last season. The offense as a whole stunk last season. Now, in fairness, if the quarterback's not a threat, It's easy to basically, if you're playing against a guy with only one leg, it's easy to focus on that one leg. And I think we might have seen that last year. Good pass defense, poor run defense last season. That game at week 3 at Wyoming might be a little sneaky, as that's a weird venue. I'm going to put it that way. Now, you all are used to playing at altitude. You're shaking your head no. You'll get it in a second here.
No, I'm not shaking my head at no at you. Believe me. It's what
okay.
You're saying.
I don't know about the season wins. There's a lot of kind of conjecture here. I just want to start. I'm going to throw it to you, Nathan, in a series of questions. What happened here? Were they just not ready from a talent standpoint, a roster standpoint, not ready for the Big 12? Is a lot of it stemming from poor quarterback play and it all just flows from there? Tell us where the season went sideways and for what reason last season.
So they got off to a 4-0 start when Keaton Slovis was 100% healthy. So that he got hurt at West Virginia, and from there it was downhill. But let's start at the quarterback position, because that's really where BYU is known for. Their quarterbacks have been was horrible last year, and they need to improve that. They brought in some quarterbacks, Jerry Bohannon. They brought in McKay Hillstead from, I believe it was Utah State. They had a couple quarterbacks retire. So, in my opinion, they're going to go the way of the quarterback. If Jerry Bohannon comes in and plays like he did at Baylor in 2021 when they won the league, BYU is going to be really good, because I think their defense is excellent. Very strong in the trenches. They've made some improvements on the offensive line, but I question some of the scheduling. Having SMU and Wyoming back-to-back, I don't know what Tom Homo was doing. I don't know what he was smoking that day, but that's a big mistake, because at Dallas, you're going to be playing, and it's going to be extremely hot in September. And then you go up to Wyoming, and it's not only at elevation, but it's a horrible place to play. If you've never been to Wyoming, there's no reason to go to Wyoming. I'll just put it that way. Having Kansas State at home, having Kansas at home, those are big advantages. That at Baylor game could really dictate whether they win 6 games or not. They're going to struggle against Arizona, Oklahoma State. They're going to struggle at UCF. I think Kansas and Kansas State at home, they might steal one of those. Arizona State's a win. They finished with Houston. But, of course, the only game that really matters on this schedule, because BYU's still climbing, is that Utah game November 9th. And to be honest with you, looking at this schedule, knowing you're not going to win the league, they might do something just to try to win that one game. Utah's got a couple of trap games around the game with BYU. All your stats, there's nothing you can really say about those things. I broke the team down, and honestly, the only thing I could tell, there's a couple points I wanted to bring up. The offensive line, I think, is going to be better than people give them credit for. Their receivers are fantastic. Cody Epps, Darius Lassiter, Chase Roberts. Chase Roberts could be a day 2 NFL pick. Jay Hill, his defense is going to improve. He picked up a few people out of the transfer portal, but all conference edge, Tyler Batty, and then you put him with transfer from Weber State, Jack Kelly, who's actually a 4-star transfer. They may have the best edge duo in the league. Their defensive line may take a step up, but I think you nailed it. If the quarterback, you can pin your ears back and just rush the quarterback without a concern, because you're never going to be able to run that way, right? If your offense can't generate through the air, your run game, they're going to flood the boxes, which is what happened to BYU last year. Put 8 guys in the box and then just say, go ahead and try to beat us over the top.
Yeah, and I'd forgotten. I don't think Slovis was ever the same after he screwed up his elbow at SC. In the 2020 season, he was just throwing a bunch of ducks the whole season. Somehow he actually won Offensive Player of the Year, and I don't think he ever recovered from that. And
right,
I think he probably was healthy, like you said, or healthy for him, and probably something happened that West Virginia game, and just whatever was ailing him came back. Would be my guess. Just want to make clear before I throw it over to Robert. So if you picked up a quarterback from Utah State, do you consider yourself coming out ahead of getting that kid over Spencer Petras? I'm joking, clearly.
My opinion,
I take.
Yeah, I was just going to say, BYU needs a real quarterback. They need to recruit a 4-star quarterback. They need to get out of this transfer portal hell that they're in right now. And by the way, if Aaron Roderick, if they don't win 6 games, they need to run him out on a rail. Offensive coordinator, he was bad the last 2 years. They should fire him right now, and they'd be ahead. So, anyway.
Sitake seems safe for now, though?
I don't know. I mean, you would think so. If he only wins 4 games, though, they're going to be asking questions.
Little breaking news here on the Sharpest College Football Pod. We're not really a reporting agency, but you got it. All right, Robert, what do you think about BYU?
Yeah, this was a team I really liked a couple of years ago, but they've definitely declined since then. I think not having Keaton Slovis is just a positive in every sense of the way, in every sense of the word. That being said, though, not the greatest schedule. Okay, you've got Baylor. Wyoming is definitely not impossible. Remember, Wyoming is down their coach. They have a new coach this year, so that's definitely a possible game. Oklahoma State, that's possible, right? You've got some teams coming a while away, Kansas, Houston. You've got some people visiting you that you can definitely pick off some wins there. So I see a path to maybe 5, 6 wins. But again, this is probably not one of the top teams in the conference. They're still getting used to the Big 12, and I think this is maybe the year where they finally start doing some stuff in the Big 12. And we'll see. Maybe at UCF, maybe they could do something at Utah in your holy war there. We'll see. I think they could do some stuff. Let's see what they could do. But this is a team that I'm not on. This could be a value play in some spots depending on how Jerry Bohannon does.
And I think you nailed it because it's a 3 to 5 year climb to go from G5 independent to big boy football, right? And BYU's always played really. I mean, they won the Pac-12 South 3 years ago.
Yeah,
So used
forgot
to
about
playing
that.
those games, but the recruiting is just the recruiting is what has got to. BYU turned the basketball season around after they lost their coach to Kentucky. Now they've got a top 10 offensive basketball team in the country. Uh, Football needs to do the exact same thing. NIL needs to help. It's a climb. 3 to 5 years. That's what everybody should be looking at.
Real quick before we move on, how strong is the NIL there? I have no idea. Would you want to
It's
see more, or are you happy with it?
the basketball NIL's over the moon, right? They've got amazing backers, and that's not going to be a problem getting NIL players. Football is a different animal. For one thing, you can build a basketball team 5 times over before you build a football
Yeah,
team once
true.
over. So it's just a lot more expensive. But what was holding BYU back with the NIL before and just was resolved this offseason is the fact that it's basically legal. There are no rules around
Yeah.
NIL. And so now BYU, very conservative, obviously a religious organization, they weren't going to do anything crazy in NIL until that was established. Now that's happened. They are opening up their pocketbook a little bit more. I think next year, I think they could be pretty good. As I recall, the schedule is going to be pretty good next year for the out of conference games. Yeah, I always looking forward.
Yeah, here's an interesting point. I just thought about it now. You made a good point about the football team is much more expensive from an NIL standpoint.
Right.
Here's where the advantage that BYU historically has on the linemen in terms of the guys that go on the missions. Guess what? That's a lot more NIL money that you have to, in theory, take care of too. There's 2 extra classes that you have to keep on NIL payroll, right?
Yeah, I don't know how they handle that when kids are out on their missions. I don't know what the NILs are doing to support them. They're not playing football, so it's hard to give them money. But at the same time, you want them to stick around and not transfer like BYU's every once in a while lost a transfer after they come back off their mission. Yeah, they may have to start doing that. I don't know. That's something I hadn't even really considered.
Yeah, it's interesting. Or maybe just those 2 years, just not to get too cheeky here, but maybe just the church gets the benefit of their NIL, and that's it. I don't.
Yeah, no. If our NIL is based in getting spirits back to Christ, right?
There you go. All right, very fair. Okay, BYU. That's the last one we're going to go into detail. Just a handful of the rest since we don't have time. One sentence on each, then I'll let you guys chime in. Texas Tech, ongoing QB issues. I like Joey McGuire, but I need to see more proof of concept there. Houston, Willie Fritz is a slow build. I don't see anything. He's starting from ground zero there. I do like that he signed the Louisiana quarterback, Zion Chris, who was awesome at Louisiana last season. So long term, I like that. Cincinnati, year 2 of Scott Satterfield. I'm of mixed opinions here. I don't like Sorsby, the quarterback from Indiana. I do like Tyron Smith, who was awesome at UTEP a couple years ago and disappeared last season. Dave Aranda is trying to save his job with DeQuan Finn. Good job, or good luck with that. And all I need to say about Arizona State is their their quarterback room includes Jeff Sims and Trenton Bourget. Well done, guys.
Crazy.
Nathan, any impressions on these 5?
No, I think you nailed them. Each one of them. Texas Tech shocks me that they've had the troubles they have, but Houston, Cincinnati, I think Baylor's struggling. Dave Aranda gets fired this year if he doesn't win maybe 7 games. And I don't know what they need to do at Arizona State to get a good football team put together there, but it's a beautiful place and you
It
can play
is.
golf 30 365 days a year. I don't understand. It's not next to the ocean, so I don't understand why they have trouble getting a football team put together, but they do.
That's gonna be like the ongoing riddle of college football. Is ASU? Why not? Why
Yeah,
is it not
right.
happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Robert. Any impressions on these five?
Yeah, I don't think DeQuan Finn is going to save the Dave Aranda's job there. I think he's in trouble. I do Houston. I think Willie Fritz can do some stuff there. That's going to be a team to watch on a bit. Not particularly high on Cincinnati or Texas Tech, but Arizona State though. We like their coach at random times. Now, if it's Jeff Sims starting, I'm not betting on them. But with Trenton Bergay, yeah, maybe. We'll see. Not Jeff Sims, though. If somehow Jeff Sims finds his way as a starting quarterback, that is a giant red flag. But other than that, though, those are the kind of things I see. Arizona State's a team I'm curious about, but not with that quarterback room the way it is. Maybe next year, maybe they're a year away, but not with that quarterback room.
I tell you what, buddy. If you're ever feeling confident in Trenton Bourget, just give me a call and we can cut out the 10% VIG. I'm happy to talk business with you directly. Okay. All right. 3 questions on the Big 12 conference. I've got a bonus question after this. The best Big 12 Heisman bet. Robert, I'll let you go first on this.
I think you know which one I'm going to pick here. I'm going to say Jalen Daniels. That's, I think, the best one on the board. I'm not. I think he's, again, my strategy for Heisman, and I said this before in one of our other podcasts, is because I thought the way Heisman was decided was similar to the NFL, where it was like the best player on the best-ish team. And that apparently isn't true anymore. So I'm just going for stats. So just give me big numbers. And I think Jalen Daniels, if he's healthy for this full season, can put up giant numbers.
All right. Nathan?
Ollie Gordon.
Ooh.
And it's just because I think he's the best running back, certainly in the conference. And yeah, he could win the Heisman Trophy this year.
I'm going to contradict myself. As much as I said I don't like Oklahoma State, I will say that Gordon could be the best player in the country this season, so I will go with him. Give me one upset in the Big 12. Doesn't have to be a conference game.
BYU beats Kansas.
Wow.
At home.
I'm going to go before Robert steals mine. I actually Stanford to beat TCU.
Wow.
I like that 8 points. Yeah.
I said because I wanted that one too, and he knew. Let me think here. Kansas plays Utah, right?
I can't remember.
Yeah. Give me Kansas over Utah.
Wow.
I'm fairly sure they play. Let me just check. But if they do play, give me Kansas. I like Kansas.
Do they play in Salt Lake?
Let me see.
I doesn't lose a lot of home games. They're like
no, they don't
42
play. No, they don't play.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it's written
They
down.
do not play.
No. Iowa State does. Oklahoma State does.
Okay, give me Iowa State over Utah then.
Oops. Oh, shoot. Sorry. All right. Get oriented here. There we go. All right. So you like Iowa State over
Utah?
Okay. And before we get to the last one here, I've got a bonus question. The first place team in the final regular season standings will have more or less than 1.5 losses. Robert?
Over.
What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, I think 10-2 is your title game. Might have 3 teams with 10-2. They'll have to come up with some stupid tiebreaker to get them in there.
I agree. Okay, we agree on that.
Yeah.
All right, so then the 2 teams in the Big 12 title game. I will go first on this. I will say my first 2 teams there. I like Kansas and Iowa State. Robert?
Yeah, I'm making it for 2. Kansas, Iowa State.
You guys are tough. Tough. Kansas, Iowa State. I don't. Yeah, I definitely do not. I have Utah, and it's a coin flip between Kansas State and Oklahoma State. So I'll probably, they play Oklahoma State that season. So I'm going to put Kansas State in there.
Okay.
Utah and Kansas State. But it's going to be close. There could be 5 teams competing for that final game.
I don't disagree. All right.
Yeah.
Nathan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the Big 12 insight, the BYU detail, good information, good AL discussion as well, thought-provoking. We appreciate your time. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
No, I appreciate you guys having me back. This was fun. I like this annual thing. It'll be fun to look forward to next year. If you guys need anything from me, don't hesitate to ask. This is always fun.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
we will be back soon with the Mac preview, everyone.